You're looking at the just released RCMP surveillance video of the Parliament Hill shooting. The scene is the entry of the parliamentary precinct on Elgin Street. That circled person there, that is the shooter. He is right now running towards the center block on Parliament Hill. Minutes ago, he would have just killed Corporal Priscilla at the National War Memorial. Again, keep an eye on the guy in the white circle. He has a rifle. Other people around the area are fleeing. There he is. He's taking a rifle. This is how he got from the National War Memorial right up into Parliament Hill. He ended up hijacking a government vehicle. Again, you're seeing more video. This is video of the security cameras that are on Parliament Hill. That is the vehicle you just saw it arrive, a brown Corolla. He gets out of the vehicle. People split. There's a man with a gun. There he is, the shooter. That is him arriving on Parliament Hill. And now, take a look at this. This is East Block running, and those are government ministers' cars there. One passes two, passes three. This car is the car of Minister of State Michelle Rempel. Only her driver is in the vehicle. The minister is not. He opens the door and he says to the driver, "If you want to live, get out of the car." The driver makes a correct decision and gets out of the car. The shooter then gets around, hops in the vehicle, and now drives the rest of the way from East Block all the way up to Center Block. There you see the vehicle. It is now arriving at the Center Block. Past the doors, the front doors of the Center Block. Again, you're looking at the circle here. The vehicle then is parked just to the west side of the front doors of Center Block. Meanwhile, you're going to see in a minute, RCMP are alerted. You're going to see RCMP people are running now towards the Center Block. They know what's happening. You will see, this is another view of that car containing the shooter coming up onto Parliament Hill, and it's going to pull in a little bit here and stop. And in a minute, you're going to see RCMP cruisers are behind. They know that this individual has the gun. He's running now into Center Block, and watch this. The people running in, those are RCMP officers. People running away are civilians. Good evening from Ottawa. I'm David Akin, and tonight, again, we're going to pause our regular battleground election coverage and spend one more day at least, reviewing Wednesday's terror attack on Parliament Hill. Now, Parliament opened for business as usual today, and that was a symbol that bullets cannot stop Canada's democracy. We'll review the events that happened on Parliament Hill today, and then we'll explore some of the security implications for those working on the Hill, but also for Canadians wherever they may work and live. But first, let's review the terrifying events inside the halls of the center block of our Parliament buildings. It was here, just after 10 a.m., as we showed you, that a shooter, now identified as Michael Zahaf Bibeau, entered the front doors of this building with a Winchester 30-30 lever action rifle. Now, part of what happened next was filmed by Globe and Mail reporter Josh Wingrove using his BlackBerry smartphone. This video has been world famous now. Here's the raw, uncut video of what Wingrove taped. Now, when the end came for the shooter, it came quickly. It was over after that fusillade. And based on that video and on some discussions that I had today with a variety of sources on Parliament Hill, as well as an examination of the bullet holes in Center Block, I was up there today walking around looking where the bullets are. I was able to put this video together. I'm in the center block of the Parliament buildings in Parliament Hill, and what I want to do now is try to walk through at the scene as much as we're able to piece together about the events that happened yesterday. Right here are the front doors to the center block. They're unlocked. This is normally where MPs, political staff, And the public, they use these doors. These are the doors through which the shooter came yesterday. You can see that there are some security personnel, the blue shirts as we call them. They're wearing protective vests, but they're unarmed. They do not have any weapons. They're normally checking for identification. But yesterday, because the Prime Minister was in this building, there was a plainclothes police officer standing here at the top of these steps. That's standard procedure. The plainclothes officer sees a man with a rifle. He walks up to that man, grabs the barrel of the rifle, and points it down. At that point, the rifle goes off. The bullet hits the plainclothes police officer in the leg. The officer falls, crying, "Gun, gun, gun." There's a second plainclothes police officer, also armed. He pulls his sidearm out and is ready to shoot the shooter, but there are children here in the rotunda. This is the part of the center block we're in now. Doesn't want to discharge his weapon for fear of hitting a child or an innocent civilian. At this point, security personnel all across the hill are flooding in. They know that there is someone with a gun here in the Hall of Honor, and we don't know what that person is doing. The shooter, having been confronted, is now moving very quickly down the Hall of Honor. Follow. Every Wednesday morning, let's remember, the Prime Minister and the Conservative caucus are meeting here in the Commonwealth Room, one of the big rooms on Parliament Hill. The Prime Minister is just behind those oak doors as the shooter goes by. On the other side of the Hall of Honor, this is where the New Democrats are meeting. Thomas Mulcair and his MPs in the Railway Room. Again, nothing but an oak door between the New Democrats and the shooter. Also standing outside the Prime Minister's room, right here, is another plainclothes policeman with the sidearm. He pulls it out, fires at the bad guy, discharges a round. Doesn't apparently hit the bad guy there because the bad guy in his rifle, walking by, turns and fires around towards the policeman. The bad guy continues on down the Hall of Honor, now looking for some cover because behind him is security forces, RCMP officers with their weapons drawn. This is a crime scene today, and so this is as far as we're able to walk. We can't go any further, but that entrance down there, and you're looking at members of Parliament who are allowed to go further, that is the main entrance to the Library of Parliament. There is bullet damage, and that is what the MPs are looking at to the oak doors there. The bad guy hides himself in the vestibule, where you see those people right now. There's a column there. He gets behind a column with his weapon. Meanwhile, Kevin Vickers, the Sergeant-at-Arms, hears the gunfire. He's in his office just down this hallway. He has a sidearm in his desk. He pulls it out. He comes out of his office. He drops to the floor and is now crawling along this wall to protect himself and still get in position to be able to take a shot at the shooter. The shooter discharges at least one round. Why do we know that? There's bullet damage on the fresco of this wall, bullet damage from the shooter. Vickers eventually gets into position and is able to take the shooter down, and he's dropped just inside that vestibule. Now, there were two heroes in that sequence that I just told you about. The first was the plainclothes officer who put his hand on the barrel of the shooter's rifle and tried to stop him right at the front door. His name is Constable Samron Sun. Constable Sun has been with the House of Commons Security for 10 years. He was treated for his gunshot wound. He's in stable condition, and he's expected to make a full recovery. The other hero, of course, is the House of Commons Sergeant-at-Arms, Kevin Vickers, the man with the mace you're seeing right now on your screen, who stopped Zezaf Bibo once and for all. Today, Vickers was ready to resume his ceremonial duties leading the Speaker's Parade into the House of Commons, leading House of Commons Speaker Andrew Scheer down the very Hall of Honor that he had defended the day before. The Speaker's Parade happens every day to open the House of Commons. Normally, it's an event that only tourists pay much attention to. Well, not today. The world was watching this parade, likely the most dramatic Speaker's Parade since the tradition was born in Westminster hundreds of years ago. The parade route right through the Hall of Honor, down another hallway lined with portraits of prime ministers, and then into the House of Commons itself was lined with well-wishers, applauding political staffers, all of whom felt that they had been protected by the selfless, courageous act of both Constable Sun and Sergeant-at-Arms Vickers. We'll take a short break, and we'll be back in a minute with the story of the remarkable morning inside the House of Commons, and we'll hear from two MPs who were in those caucus rooms. Stay with us. Welcome back to a special edition of Battleground, where we're pausing our regular coverage of the Alberta by-elections of the Toronto municipal election to focus on yesterday's terror attack on Parliament Hill. MPs, particularly those in the Conservative and NDP caucus that were separated from the shooter yesterday by nothing more than an oak door, spoke to me today about the confusion, anxiety, terror, whatever it was, as they heard the gunshots in the Hall of Honor. They didn't know if the good guys or the bad guys were winning. They didn't know if the next person bursting through the door would be Kevin Vickers or would be a Canadian jihadi intent on destruction. When Prime Minister Stephen Harper spoke in the House of Commons this morning, the first thing he did was to address his concern for the health and well-being of all of his fellow MPs.
We all here are engaged in extremely demanding and stressful jobs, but the stress that many of you faced yesterday was really beyond and above anything that any of us are really expecting to face. I would just say, while we resume our duties, and I'll talk about that in a moment, I would encourage everybody here to take care of their health. Be sure that you find some time to relax in the next little while, and also, if any of you, because we are not all in perfect health, if any of you are experiencing any undue physical stress as a result of what occurred yesterday, please take the time to see a physician and get that checked out.
This was Harper the healer, and it is a sign to the Prime Minister's character that the public rarely gets to see. He's not too bad at it. Green Party leader Elizabeth May picked up on this theme of concern for all parliamentarians.
Together, we work together for this country. Whatever our views are about the future of this country, whatever course we want the country to take, at a very basic level, we are nothing more than human beings who, at a very fundamental level, care for each other. You are my work colleagues, all of the people in this place, Mr. Speaker. I must remember to address the Speaker and not each of you individually. But Mr. Speaker, through you, my colleagues must know how much I care for all of them and love them. And this is something our constituents need to know.
All right, and joining me now in studio is David Wilk, Conservative MP from British Columbia. David, good to have you on the program. You were in Parliament this morning. I thought it was a remarkable morning because people weren't members of a party. They were members of a democracy, members of a House of Commons. It was a real bond for at least, an hour or so.
It was a touching moment, especially the Prime Minister going over and hugging the opposition leader and the leader of the third party. It was a very touching moment.
And of course it came after everybody had honored the courage of the Speaker, the Sergeant at Arms. He spent 25 odd years as an RCMP officer, apparently never drew his sidearm in his service. You spent a lot of years as an RCMP officer yourself. It is a rare thing to have to draw your sidearm, and thankfully a rare thing if you're a police officer in this country to have to draw your sidearm, is it not? You're not probably going to do it every day.
It's very rare.
You were inside that caucus room yesterday, and this is your regular, let our viewers know, this happens every Wednesday. You're going to sit down, the Prime Minister's going to say a few words, you're going to have some discussions about a bunch of things. The Prime Minister starts to speak, and there's, a loud bang? Walk us through sort of how all of a sudden you realized something pretty serious was happening.
The first thing I heard was what I believed to be a shotgun, one round, followed by multitude of small firearm, which I thought...
And you know the sound of these weapons because you've had some of this training. Yeah.
So I believed it to be 9mm. It sounded like a 9mm gun. Several rounds, and the rounds were, it sounded like the sound was going from south to north. And
as the shooter was moving down the Hall of Honor, exactly.
Respecting that all our doors are closed, and they always are on Wednesday anyways. My initial instinct, police work just kicked in right away to the ground. And that's exactly what I did. I went to the ground for about 15 or 20 seconds, looked where everything was, and then noticed that the east door was what I would say needed to be secured.
And the east door is the door we showed in the segment just before. That's the door, the main door that you would come in and out for committee meetings.
Correct. So myself and a number of other colleagues went over there, locked the door, and then piled a number of chairs in front of it, recognizing that the chairs aren't there to stop someone. They're there to slow them down if they're coming in. The challenge, of course, is we don't know whether it's the bad guy shooting
Right.
or the good guy shooting
Or how many shooters were out there.
or how many shooters
And,
are.
and this is, I'm assuming, would have been the terrible anxieties. And as I mentioned in the script I was reading, who's coming through the door next? And are they going to come through the east door and the south door at the same time? You've got multiple exits, but not if multiple sets of bad guys are coming in.
Right. The important part to me was to try and stay calm and keep people calm. You don't want hysteria. It's the last thing you need. And we're trying to just control the environment that we're in. And I believe that for the most part, we did a very good job in our caucus in doing that.
And I was pointing out just before we came on TV, there's a lot of caucus members with some police experience. Yourself, Rob Clark from Saskatchewan. I think Daryl Cramp has been an OPP officer. Dave McKenzie, a former chief. Rick Norlock, Julian Fantino. Although you mentioned Julian Fantino wasn't in the caucus room. And did people worry about the Prime Minister at all? Or I mean, I assume security people immediately in and upon the PM, and they take him to wherever he had to go.
I do know that the Prime Minister was taken care of very quickly.
Yeah, and he got a chance. The Prime Minister was touring that shooting site with Speaker Scheer. So then you're in lockdown basically all day in the House of Commons. You were in some secure room. I don't know if you're allowed to disclose where you were, but you were somewhere safe basically for the balance of the day.
Correct. We were secure, and I must say that both the House Security, Senate Security, OPP, and RCMP did a fabulous job, and we took direction from them. And once center block or the second floor was secured, we had regular updates from the RCMP and the Senate and the House Security advising us of how things were going. And you're on their clock now. And
we should point out, we had cell phone service, I'm assuming disrupted by security services to prevent bad guys from using cell phones to do anything. So it was hard to talk. You could still message people, I'm assuming, or get messages out.
Well, I would have if I would have remembered to plug my phone in, except it died.
Of course. So you borrowed somebody's phone to let your folks know, or your family know you.
Yeah,
okay.
eventually I got someone to text my wife. Yeah.
And there we go. So you would have been in lockdown. Center block was locked down till after 9 or close to 10, I think, was it not?
It was a long time.
Yeah.
They made arrangements for the members of Parliament to leave. We followed the instructions of the RCMP and the House staff, House Security, and when they said the coast was clear, we followed them through a designated route, and then we were placed onto buses and removed from Centre Block.
You may have seen a little bit of the stuff that Commissioner Paulson was releasing today, some of the surveillance video outside the ground.
Yes.
So as we go through this over the days, how did this happen? How did it get as far as it did? My comment is, wow, we actually nipped this in the bud pretty quick. I mean, there was a lot of officers in the hall, and that fusillade was over very quickly. But inevitably, the question that come up, and you're going to probably be asked about this, is, do we want more weapons in the house or in the center block? Should there be some people who are armed? Maybe another locked door or two. Do you got any initial thoughts of anything? Do you feel secure right now, I guess is the question, you know?
Well, today I did, because certainly there were no visitors allowed in there, right? I will say that I felt concerned for the security of the House of Commons that are not armed.
Mm-hmm. These are the blue shirts,
The
as we
blue
call
shirts,
them.
yes, because they are really, what are you going to do?
They're the front line. All they've got is a vest, and that's it, and a club.
So I'm sure that those that are involved will review that, and we'll see where it takes us.
David Wilkes, thank you. It's good to see you. Thank you for your work as an MP and your work previously as a police officer. Great to have you on the program.
Thank you very much, David.
All right, we're going to take another break, and we'll talk to a guy who was in a room on the other side of the floor. Charlie Angus is the MP who's going to join us in a minute, and we'll hear what it was like in the New Democratic caucus. Stay with us.
We will not be intimidated. We will. We'll be vigilant, but we will not run scared. We will be prudent, but we will not panic. And as for the business of government, well, here we are in our seats, in our chamber, in the very heart of our democracy, and our work goes on.
And that, of course, is the Prime Minister from earlier today giving his speech in the House of Commons. He was saying that just after he'd wished the health and well-being of MPs. Our reporter Giuseppe Valiente has had a very busy day. Giuseppe, you were in the House of Commons for that today. And there are some new things on the Hill today. For one thing, the public was not allowed to be on Parliament Hill, and some new security protocols look like they're going into place. Fill us in on what's up with protecting people on the Hill.
Right. Well, David, as you know, the Parliament Hill was there was much more security there because of what happened yesterday. There were armed RCMP guards at every entrance to Parliament Hill. The only people who could get there were staffers, journalists, and politicians. The people who actually work there. Parliament Hill will remain closed to the public for an undetermined amount of time. Now, the person who controls the security inside the buildings of Parliament Hill, that's the Speaker of the House. His name is Andrew Scheer, and his staff. He asked his staff for a comprehensive review of the protocols, of the security protocols inside Parliament Hill. And so we'll have to see what comes with that review. The RCMP control outside of Parliament Hill. RCMP head Bob Paulson said he added a rapid response team to the area outside Parliament Hill. Paulson also said today that he added RCMP to the Prime Minister's security detail, who will follow Stephen Harper 24/7.
A lot of things happening. Commissioner Paulson gave a press conference towards the end of the day, as did the Chief of the Defence Staff, Tom Lawson. Any takeaways from either or both of those press conferences?
Well, in particular, Paulson said that what happened on Monday, because there were two attacks in Canada. Of course, on Monday, there was a man who drove a car into a soldier just south of Montreal. The Prime Minister called that a terrorist attack. Today, just yesterday, was the other attack, the shooting inside Parliament Hill. The Prime Minister also said that what happened yesterday was a terrorist attack. But Paulson said the two events, Monday and Wednesday, there's no evidence and no indication that those events were related, which is interesting because many different journalists and other experts suggested strongly that both events were related somehow, with two people being radicalized, two individuals who converted to Islam. But Paulson said they were two from what he knows, from what the evidence he has, isolated incidents.
Giuseppe Valiente in Ottawa tonight. Giuseppe, thanks so much. Appreciate it. We should also point out that the Chief of Defence Staff, Tom Lawson, told Canadian Forces members, wear your uniform to work, go home in your uniform to work, maybe don't wear your uniform in shopping malls, try to minimize the exposure at this point. So being proud of wearing the uniform, but also being aware of some new risks. I want to play a little clip now from, we heard a little bit from the Prime Minister, we've heard from Elizabeth May. Here's the Leader of the Official Opposition today in the House of Commons, Thomas Mulcair.
Yesterday's cowardly act was meant to shake this great city of Ottawa, and indeed the entire country, but it has only hardened our resolve. It only strengthened our commitment to each other and to a peaceful world. Now, let us not become more suspicious of our neighbors. Let's not be driven by fear, because in Canada, love always triumphs over hate.
That Thomas Mulcair in the House of Commons. And if you look closely, sitting right behind the Leader there was this guy, Charlie Angus, MP for Timmins, James Bay. Thanks for joining us, Charlie.
It's great to be on the show again.
An emotional time, I'm assuming, for every member of Parliament. And one of the things that struck me, and I was watching those in the gallery, was, when normally a leader stands up and says something significant, his side stands up to applaud and everybody else sits down. But in this case, whether it was your leader or the Prime Minister or Justin Trudeau, all MPs were standing up to recognize important things that people were saying. It was a real special hour in the House, I thought. It
was a real special moment. You don't see moments like that very often, and fortunately we don't have incidents that cause those moments very often. But it made me realize that I learned a lot yesterday. I learned a lot about what fear looks like. I learned what bravery looks like, and certainly we saw the bravery of Kevin Vickers and the incredible frontline people who put their lives on the line.
All 20 or 30 officers who were staring that guy down. Yeah.
But there's another kind of bravery, which is the sense that we hold together in community. And I could see that all through yesterday and today, of people making sure that each other was okay. That, we are opponents and we disagree and we stand up and accuse each other of all manner of things, but we are a common community and we represent the people of Canada. And so bravery is also the compassion that was shown all over the city of Ottawa yesterday. I saw it today at the War Memorial as all manner of Canadians, from young Muslim students to First Nation people to elderly senior citizens, came to pay tribute to a man who gave his life for our country. And that's that kind of bravery, that sense that we are in this together no matter what, that will defeat any kind of deranged person.
And we should mention this. You talk about the bravery of our first line responders who are chasing down a guy with a rifle. The citizens who were just near the war memorial when the soldier was killed, and I think there was a off-duty nurse, despite the fact that it was still a very dangerous situation, trying to help to resuscitate that man. Just, again, that's what, it's corny to say, but that's what Canadians do.
That really is the mark of Canadians. I did a lot of international media over the last 2 days, and it was interesting because, you know, I think sometimes they think we're the funny little Canadians, that we're somehow naive. We're not naive.
Right.
We do what has to be done. We were there.
John Manley, sort of interrupted, said Canadian boys are buried in graveyards all over the world as a demonstration of that commitment.
And I didn't feel I needed to remind our international friends, but yes, we do what has to be done. But our bravery is different. We don't come back and puff up our chest and tell it. We do it and we get on. And you saw that today in Ottawa, all over. People making sure that they were careful, but also incredible scenes of, like, people going up and thanking police officers. I had people coming up and thank me as a politician all over. I was
And
trying
never heard
I had to
that
buy
before.
a clean shirt to do an interview, and people were coming up and saying thank you. Not so much because I'm a politician, but because we had to be there, we had to stand up, we had to speak for them who didn't have the voices, and those are the things I want to take out of today, out of what happened, out of the tragedy. This crazy person did not break us. They did not make us run in fear. We didn't hide behind each other. We stood together, and we will stand together because that's what we do as Canadians.
Let me ask you, that moment in your caucus, because you're at the same time as David Wilkes is in with his caucus. You're right across the street. I don't know if it was your leader was speaking when the first bang, thump, whatever it was, but tell me what happened there.
Well, we have 100 MPs, staff. Thomas had just finished speaking. We had been talking about a number of issues, and we were about to, I think I was getting up to get a coffee because I was over at the far end of the room. We heard bang, 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 and someone said, "What's that?" And someone said, "That's a gun." And we knew, okay, maybe it's outside. Then we heard we heard the heavy-duty gunfire. So now we know someone outside our door. There may be multiple shooters. The amount of gunshots told us that there's this very serious situation. We're trying to barricade the doors with tables, but the doors open out. People were actually, some of our MPs were holding the doors shut to try and protect it. We were getting people down on the ground. But again, there was a lot of little
And I don't know
moments.
if you know this, one of those bullet holes I saw today went right through your door and stopped. There's a second door behind it, the bathroom, and stopped it there. Very dangerous.
I mean, at that moment, what I thought is that there's shooters and they have a choice of two doors, because thank God this man wasn't very bright. Like, let's just put that on the record. He wasn't very bright. He ran right past two doors that would have given him maximum height targets. So,
And we should note, outside those doors, it says Conservative Party Caucus. There's a big sign, NDP
I know.
Party Caucus. It's,
so
yeah.
you know, in that moment, you're thinking he's choosing one door or the other, or they are. And I wasn't thinking, I hope to God they're going into the Conservative caucus. I wasn't thinking that at all. We were thinking, let's hope everyone's safe here. So we were keeping people down on the ground. My concern around me, I had some of the younger MPs who were mothers, and you want to make sure always the mothers.
They're worried about their kids.
The
Some might have been
mothers
in daycare
worried
here
about
on the
their
Hill.
kids. Lisanne Lamont had just brought her baby for the first time to our caucus. The stroller was in the room. So we look out for each other, and we got each other out, and it was make sure everybody's safe. And even Hill staff, I remember there was a Hill staff who ended up with us. We got separated and for some reason got put out on the lawn of Parliament. And okay, we're all staying together. And even the guy, I went up to him and I said, "Who are you?" And he said, he gave me his name, said, I work for the House of Commons. I said, "Well, you're with us right now. You don't leave until we all leave." And so we stayed together, and that's what you do in those situations.
Well, Charlie Angus, it's great you and everybody are safe and sound, and thanks for coming in and sharing that with us tonight.
Well,
Appreciate
thanks
it.
so much. And you know, Canadian people, I'm so proud. I've had beautiful messages, and people aren't panicking. We don't panic. People are looking at this straight on and saying, let's do what we got to do. Let's do it right.
All right, Charlie Angus, safe drive home this weekend.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to come back with more. We're going to talk about more, maybe some of the security implications. Should we be doing more on the Hill? Should we be doing more off the Hill? How do we prevent young men, and it's mostly men, from being radicalized? Stay with us. Battleground will be right back. That is a picture from the House of Commons earlier today. Stephen Harper congratulating or thanking Kevin Vickers. And now look at this. That's Stephen Harper and Justin Trudeau, folks. That's cats living with dogs, and it's not done yet. This is, again, after the Prime Minister's speech where he expresses concern for the well-being of MPs. And those are two MPs. Forget that one's a Conservative and one's a New Democrat. There they are again. That's after Trudeau has just spoken. There's a bit of comrades in arms sort of a flavor to the morning. They're going to get back at each other tomorrow. They'll be all saying nasty things about each other and how they're all unfit to do this or unfit to do that. But today, quite united in appreciation for that man, Kevin Vickers, the Sergeant at Arms, the hero of the day. And there you see, lots of hugging. David McLaughlin, who has worked for politicians on Parliament Hill and in New Brunswick, of course. This happens, it's rare, but it happens where guys who fight tooth and nail and you think can't stand each other, there are moments, and actually your former boss, Minister Flaherty Schooner, was referenced today as one of those moments that really brings people together. You know, they're human beings at the end of the day.
Yeah, they do fight like cats and dogs, and so the analogy is quite appropriate. Something to keep in mind, yesterday the institution of Parliament was assaulted. But also, by the experiences of the MPs you've had on this show, we know they were very close to feeling themselves assaulted and attacked. So there has to be a very personal, emotional investment by each of them in what happened and the shared experience. And so that's what we're seeing here is a very human reaction. They're shared something quite significant, quite personal, beyond their roles as MPs, as human beings. And I think that's how they're reacting, responding to each other. It's good to see, and it's entirely appropriate.
There's going to be discussions, and I think Canadians are already starting to have this discussion. I mean, I see it on my social media feed going, why aren't there people in the House of Commons armed, ready to defend it? Why aren't the front doors of the place locked? Why aren't they? I mean, I like the idea. It's easy to get into ours, but...
Well, you know, if you want to go in and watch Question Period, if you, unless you're a regular, visitor, or sorry, regular, employee, staffer on the Hill, you do have to go through some security. It's not like there's no security there. We had a unique incident that, frankly, it seems like from what the RCMP and others are telling us, nobody had expected. Nobody had planned for it. They said yesterday
they were surprised, and again today.
Absolutely. So who would have thought? I mean, what the closest thing we've actually seen to this, David, was the White House. A couple of weeks ago, there was a video of a guy jumping over the fence with a knife and getting in through the main doors, and almost to the east room, up to the staircase to where the first family lives. So, you know, these things obviously are they can happen, but they are so unexpected. And so the issue becomes how much security and what kind of security do you need for such an improbable kind of event? We will see more security as a result of this, but hopefully we'll see it in the right way.
We saw it after 9/11.
We saw it after 9/11, absolutely.
And you may or may not have been on the Hill. You may have been in New Brunswick at the time. Once a guy tried to drive a Jeep right through the front door center block.
Oh, absolutely. I was on the Hill. I remember those episodes and that. What we have now, of course, is this new phenomenon of radicalization and for individuals, particularly because of what's happening in the Middle East. And those motives are becoming, just more and more demonic in a way. They're driving people to do certain things that we really hadn't planned for and really don't have yet a handle on. So, the lone gunman theory, right? The one individual, errant in behavior, perhaps, clearly with some mental problems and some other things. How do you plan to protect yourself against that one thing?
And correct me if I'm wrong, I'm trying to think of the details of the guy who drove his car into the center block. Wasn't necessarily suicidal. In fact, I think survived and was subsequently prosecuted. Yeah. But you get the sense today that the guy showed up with a gun knowing he wasn't coming out on his own 2 feet. In other words, and how do you protect yourself against someone who's saying, I don't care if I live or die, or I'm part of an ideology, this sort of jihadi, which I'll get rewarded in another life for actually dying if I can take out some people. It's hard to protect against.
It's absolutely hard, and it's ideology. It's some kind of religious bent, and that is sort of perverted itself in this person's mind. And what's in a person's mind is sort of, we always say that. How do we obviously know what's in a person's mind? We don't. We have to watch their actions, but we are getting clues. And clearly this is a threat, and we now worry about copycats and other kinds of things. But it's also evident, we've heard information that this particular individual was not tracked in the same way. There was no real buildup of evidence that he was going to act in a certain way. So yeah, this is a tough one. And you go back to what you said, David. How do we balance ourselves against? We need the openness. It's a democracy. If we shut the place down, they win.
Right. Well, the Parliament front, the lawn, is where we celebrate Canada Days and Heritage Days. People do yoga once a week on this lawn. Yep. This is where we protest if we have some beefs. Absolutely. We have to protect this space, but with that comes some risks, and then again, it gets to how do we manage those risks?
Well, anybody who goes on Parliament Hill, not just working there, we're going there. I'd like to feel safe on
Right.
Parliament Hill or secure, but I also want to go on Parliament Hill. So balancing that out and sorting that out, clearly there's some lessons to be learned and there's some steps that can be taken when you see the video of the gunman and some of the things that happen. But whether or not we have to shut the place down, I think there'll be a clear, resounding no to that. But there will be some additional steps.
I don't know if you saw some of the foreign coverage, particularly U.S. coverage, saying, jihadis in Canada, maybe we should seal the border with the United States.
Well, this
I don't know how you come to those conclusions.
It happens because they are so petrified about this. I mean, there's almost like a fear infecting governments these days about these one-off threats that are happening. And, there was a time when our countries weren't so fearful. And maybe we have to go back to that and be realistic about what we can protect ourselves against and how we can deal with it. But remember, in 9/11, there was that theory that got out
That they all came from
that
Canada.
they came from Canada, propagated in part by a certain New York senator named Hillary Clinton.
Right.
So it had some get, as they say, and still to this day, we have to knock that back sometimes. So yeah, it's always the border. We have these, somebody coming across the border. The U.S. is border preoccupied. It's a border paranoia, and it affects business, affects a lot of things. So yeah, we're going to have to deal with that too. We got to deal with the reality. We're going to have to deal with the perception as well.
David McLaughlin, thank you. Good to see you are safe and sound. Appreciate
Thank you.
your
You
input.
too.
We're going to get a little perspective from the United States. Our Washington correspondent, Jessica Murphy, is standing by. We'll talk about terror and fears of from an American's perspective. Stay with us. Now, yesterday's attack here in Ottawa is raising a lot of questions south of the border. Americans are taking a closer look at the dangers of so-called lone wolf terrorists. They're looking at radicalization. They're looking at the security measures here in Canada and at the border. In fact, I'm going to tell you, I was running the crews from CNN, ABC, CBS up here in our Parliament Hill halls today. Our chief Washington correspondent, Jessica Murphy, spent a lot of time working here in Parliament, now works at the U.S. Capitol. Jess, President Obama said yesterday that Americans were I think the term used, shaken by the events here in Ottawa. But now there is a renewed focus on security, cross-border. What does it mean for the USA? What's going on in your neck of the woods?
Well, look, there are a lot of questions about what happened yesterday. Of course, in Canada, questions about how this could even happen. And in the U.S., really questions about what it means for security here in the United States. The questions, for example, about reports so far unconfirmed that the gunman actually traveled to the U.S. on at least 4 occasions. We know that the FBI, for example, and authorities are looking to who he may have met with down here, although there's no confirmation, information that he may have met with any extremists down here. And then more broadly, David, as you noted, this question of what this means for border security, what Canadian counterterrorism measures, are they strong enough when it comes to preventing potential attacks, for example, in the United States. But today at the White House, spokesman Josh Earnest said that Canada and the U.S. are strong allies on the counterterrorism file and that they did work closely together. Listen.
There continues to be extremely strong counterterrorism coordination between the United States and Canada. We value that strong working relationship. That strong working relationship enhances the security of the American people and the Canadian people. And there is a high priority that's placed on ensuring that that relationship continues to be strong. And we're going to continue to reinforce our efforts to ensure that that's the case. The second thing, and I think this may be more directly about what the President was referring to, are ongoing efforts to counter violent extremism.
So extremism, the threat of ISIS, the threat of terrorism is a real concern in the U.S. I think they're surprised to see it play out in such a way in Canada. And both the President yesterday and Earnest again today underscored that counterterrorism officials on both sides of the border were now in even closer contact, and the need to ensure that, again, counterterrorism efforts were in sync. Those are the words being used, in sync, in both Canada and the U.S., David.
All right, so that's sort of government to government, sort of how you everybody doing. But there's also some sense of the American people feeling bad or wanting to show some support for the Canadian people.
They do, of course. It's interesting to watch. First off, I never thought I would see Question Period carried live in the United States on all 3 networks. There is tremendous interest in this story. I was at the Canadian Embassy today. I spoke with some people, Canadians but Americans as well, who went to sign the Book of Condolence. There were some flowers left outside at the embassy with a heartfelt note saying that we are heartbroken over the horrific attacks in Ottawa and of course those earlier this week in Quebec, and also saying please know your American neighbors are with you in thought and prayer. So definitely feelings of solidarity between the 2 countries, David.
Jessica Murphy in the U.S. Capitol tonight for us. Jessica, thank you so much. Still ahead for us at this moment of national adversity, our political leaders, well, they've risen to the occasion. John Robson explains.
In times of national trouble, the words of leaders matter. Last night, in the wake of the terrorist shooting in Ottawa, all 3 party leaders rose to the occasion, making remarks that were appropriate to the traumatic circumstances that had just unfolded. I'll be back with more on that after the break. At critical moments, the words spoken by leaders matter, particularly when a nation is under threat. We remember the words that Winston Churchill spoke in the darkest days of the Second World War about fighting them on the beaches. We remember Franklin Roosevelt's day that will live in infamy. And we remember after the terrorist attack on Manhattan, 9/11, Jean Chrétien found appropriate words to speak about a people united in compassion, in grief, and in resolve. Yesterday it was the turn of the current party leaders to speak. And listening to them at this critical moment, I think they got it right. Their remarks were brief. Their remarks were compassionate. Their remarks did show resolve, but their remarks did not bluster. And I looked back at some of these other remarks that were made, for instance, by Robert Borden when the First World War started, William Lyon Mackenzie King on the outbreak of the Second World War, and again at Jean Chrétien's remarks. And I will say that there's a certain flatness in oratory today. They cannot use phrases like the shadow of war. The sentences are simpler. There's been a bit of a dumbing down, but the tone was right. And the most important thing, you saw this with the premiers too, they carried on, their resolve was not shaken, and the party leaders in this difficult situation following a terrorist attack, it seems to me, acquitted themselves, all 3 of them, well.
Well, some nice words from John Robson. John, thank you so much. Now, if you have some thoughts about, should there be more security, less security, guns, who knows what, what's this week look like to you? Tell us about it. Send us your email, battleground@sunmedia.ca, or if you'd like to get a hold of me directly, davidakin.com. There it is there. davidakin.com, battleground@sunmedia.ca. Also wanted to pass on, listen, if you're planning to come to Parliament Hill tomorrow, Friday, and you haven't got a media pass or you're an MP or whatever, probably not the best day. For the 2nd day in a row, public access to the Parliament buildings itself closed. No public. It's going to be journalists and MPs and staffers only. Tomorrow, you will be able to get on the grounds of the Parliament Hill buildings, not in them. So if you wanted to come to the lawn or look around, you can do that. There's going to be some enhanced security measures. Be prepared for some traffic delays, perhaps, if you're in the area. If you use some of the buses that come back and forth to Parliament Hill, also likely to be some delays. But some, again, unique security protocols, at least for tomorrow. And of course, we're going to see, we heard the commissioner today say there's going to be some new stuff here on the Hill. That's all for our show tonight. We're going to get back to our regular battlegrounds. We've got elections next week, folks. Want to tell you about them tomorrow, 5 Eastern, 9 Pacific. Hope you'll join us then for more Battleground. I'm David Akin. Have yourself a good night.